Good evening. We begin tonight with a truly unprecedented development from the front lines in Ukraine, a shift in warfare that military strategists are already calling a game changer. President Volodymyr Zelensky himself went on record, stating, and I quote, "No Ukrainian soldiers crossed that ground. 0 casualties. Position taken." He was referring to an event on April 13, 2026, when Ukraine captured an enemy position without a single infantryman setting foot on the battlefield. The position simply fell. This raises a critical, unanswered question. How did Ukraine achieve this without a single soldier crossing the line, and what does it mean for the future of this conflict? What we are witnessing is the deployment of 25,000 contracted, funded, armed ground robots rolling directly toward Russian trenches. These are not drones, not missiles, but ground-based machines operated by Ukrainian soldiers from distances of up to 20 kilometers away. On that pivotal day, April 13, 2026, Russian soldiers, looking up from their trenches, reportedly unloaded their rifles into the machines advancing on them. Then, in a moment unprecedented in this war, they surrendered to the robot. Russia, it appears, has no immediate answer for what is coming next, and what is coming next is 25,000 more of these systems. Analysts have noted that the position taken on April 13th was likely a secondary strongpoint, not a major fortress. While that observation is worth making, it doesn't fundamentally alter the story. Military doctrine doesn't shift when a major battle is won. It shifts when a new tactic proves effective just once. Because once means it's real, and real means it can be scaled. The first tank didn't win a war, but it proved tanks worked. Everything that followed was about production. Ukraine has now proven this tactic works. Just 5 days later, on April 18th, Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov announced contracts for 25,000 ground robotic systems. This figure for the first half of 2026 already doubles everything procured in all of 2025. Russia's entire war strategy has been built on one core bet: outlast the humans, accept losses, apply pressure, and wait for the other side to run out of men. Ukraine has just changed what it's sending to the fight. This mass procurement and rapid deployment of ground robots represents a profound departure from conventional military escalation. Historically, such a dramatic shift in force composition would take years, if not decades, of research, development, and integration. Ukraine's accelerated timeline, driven by wartime necessity, is setting an entirely new precedent for military-industrial adaptation. Let's walk through what April 13th actually looked like, because the mechanics here are what make the 25,000 number so meaningful. Phase 1. FPV drones and surveillance. UAVs arrive first. Their mission is not to bomb, but to meticulously map every trench line, every bunker entrance, every firing position. All of this intelligence is cataloged before a single ground robot moves. Simultaneously, these drones go to work from above, utilizing autonomous targeting systems capable of maintaining lock, even through electronic jamming. Russian soldiers cannot lift their heads without being tracked. If you stick your head up, the drone notices. If you keep your head down, you are blind and unable to move. That is not a battle. That is a cage. Phase 2. The ground robots enter what is now termed the death zone. This is a 20 to 25 kilometer band where drone saturation makes daytime human movement a genuinely terminal career decision. Ukrainian infantry commanders used to stare at that ground on a map and quietly calculate the devastating casualty cost of crossing it. The robots don't calculate. They roll, armed, armored, and completely indifferent to being shot. A Ukrainian drone operator, known by the call sign Bambi, and we can only assume that call sign has a story behind it, described what Russian soldiers are facing. A ground robot comes toward your position, and there's nothing you can do. If you shoot a person in the chest, they stop. If you shoot a robot, it feels no pain, and there's a person behind the screen who will respond. Now here's the psychological dimension that doesn't get said clearly enough. Russian doctrine has always relied on one core assumption: the enemy bleeds too. You apply enough pressure, you accept enough of your own casualties, and eventually the human cost becomes unacceptable to the other side. Robots remove that calculus entirely. There is no cost threshold that makes a machine stop attacking. It doesn't reach a point of exhaustion. It doesn't watch its friends die and reconsider. It doesn't negotiate with itself at 3 o'clock in the morning about whether this is worth it. The surrender near Lyman, where 3 Russian soldiers gave themselves up to an armed ground robot, isn't weakness. It's completely rational behavior in a situation their entire military tradition gave them no tools to handle. Your weapons aren't stopping it. Your training didn't cover it. And it is still coming. What exactly is the play? Let's talk about December, because April 13th didn't come out of nowhere. Ukraine has been running this experiment for months, and the results before April were already extraordinary. In December 2025, a Ukrainian robot, reportedly the dev droid, held a defensive position alone for 45 days. Operators controlled it remotely from 24 kilometers away, with maintenance and reloading every 48 hours. A machine held ground for 6 weeks straight, without a single Ukrainian soldier present at the position. For context, the Battle of Rorke's Drift, which many will know from film, and which military historians cite as one of the great defensive stands in British history, lasted 12 hours. The dev droid held for 45 days. Then in January, 3 Russian soldiers surrendered to an armed ground robot near Lyman, the first documented surrender to a machine in this conflict. That same month, Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade released footage of a kamikaze robot carrying 12 anti-tank mines advancing on Russian troops who were hiding from drones, a machine hunting soldiers who were already hiding from other machines. April 13th wasn't a fluke. It was the graduation ceremony. Here's where the scale becomes genuinely difficult to process. In the first quarter of 2026, Ukrainian ground robotic systems completed between 22,000 and 24,500 missions. March alone reportedly exceeded 9,000 missions in a single month. That's 300 robot missions a day, every single day. To put that in a frame that lands immediately, in the entire Falklands War, the British flew roughly 1,800 combat sorties over 74 days. Ukraine is running 300 robot missions in a single day, routinely in March. This is not a pilot program. This is an industrialized operational tempo. Behind it are 280 companies, 550 distinct systems, and a procurement agency that has already signed 19 contracts worth roughly $250 to $268 million with domestic manufacturers. And the tuition fees for all of this, it should be noted, have been extraordinary. Now Minister Fedorov wants 25,000 more systems on contract by June. 25,000 isn't an ambition, it's a purchase order. The companies exist. The contracts are being signed. The industrial base is already running at the pace that produced 300 missions a day. Silicon Valley has sandboxes. Ukraine has a war. Now let's talk about the specific reason Russia's countermeasures aren't working. Because Ukraine has robots tells you nothing. The details are where this gets serious. Take the Ratel H, the one that made Russia's electronic warfare teams quietly furious, and they have every right to be. Originally it was a logistics carrier, moving ammo forward, evacuating wounded back, useful, unglamorous work. Then, in early 2026, it was upgraded with a fiber-optic FPV drone launch module. Here's why that is a problem Russia cannot currently solve. Standard radio-controlled drones can be jammed. Ukraine spent 2 years dealing with that. Russia spent significant money, years, and real investment building jamming infrastructure to exploit exactly that vulnerability. Fiber-optic control runs through a physical cable. There is no radio signal to intercept. There is no frequency to block. You cannot jam a cable. Russia's electronic warfare investment, expensive, sophisticated, years in the making, is irrelevant against it. Not partially effective, not degraded, but irrelevant. That's not propaganda. That's physics. The strategic redundancy of Russia's extensive electronic warfare investment, rendered obsolete by a simple fiber-optic cable, highlights a critical vulnerability in modern military planning. This rapid technological leapfrogging, where a low-cost, innovative solution bypasses a high-cost, established countermeasure, is an unusual and potent form of asymmetric warfare that challenges traditional defense procurement cycles. The support layer behind the Ratel H runs just as quietly. The Termit carries 20 anti-tank mines per run across terrain that would get a human engineer killed before his third. Russian armored columns advanced through what their reconnaissance said was clear ground. The Termit was there 4 hours ago and had somewhere else to be. The Zamaiwai, carrying up to 1,000 kilograms, has been running resupply through the death zone around Pokrovsk since December without a soldier on board. Russia targets the supply routes. The Zamaiwai doesn't have a nervous system to particularly care about that. At the sharp end, the Ardel and Protector provide fire support, with a grenade launcher and a Browning M 2.50 caliber, respectively. The M2 has been in continuous military service since 1933. It has now outlasted 2 world wars, the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and is currently being mounted on autonomous Ukrainian ground robots in 2026, a remarkable second act for a weapon that many in this audience will remember from entirely different contexts. The designer John Browning died in 1926. He would have thoughts. Now here's where the cost argument lands concretely. In February 2026, Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade NC-13 unit conducted Operation Samurai. 2 ground robots pushed through an industrial zone between Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk toward Russian ammunition depots. Russia threw everything at stopping them. 4 FPV drones, 7 airstrikes, 6 artillery rounds. The robots completed the mission. The depot exploded. Russia spent tens of thousands of dollars in munitions trying to stop 2 machines worth a fraction of that. The machines didn't notice the price difference. And that cost asymmetry, where stopping the robot cost more than deploying it, is precisely why Russia has no answer. Every time they try to stop one, they're losing the economic argument. At scale, that compounds into a structural problem with no clean solution. Ukraine's Hornet drone has reportedly begun targeting Russian military vehicles with significantly reduced human involvement in the terminal attack phase. Built-in targeting software maintains lock under jamming. The operator sets the mission. The system finds the truck. AI-assisted autonomous targeting. Documented, reported, active. The line between tool and decision maker is blurring on a live front right now. Not in a lab, not in a policy paper, but on the Eastern Front in Ukraine in April 2026. When historians write about when autonomous warfare actually began as a deployed reality rather than a concept, this is the period they'll point to, and Russia does not have an equivalent system in the field. This economic asymmetry is a potent, underappreciated dimension of modern conflict. Unlike traditional warfare, where the cost of destruction often outweighs the cost of defense, here the defender is forced to expend disproportionately more resources to counter a comparatively cheap, expendable asset. This creates an unsustainable financial drain on the aggressor, a strategic pressure point rarely seen in historical conflicts. Now let's be fair, Russia is not helpless. Russia has genuinely sophisticated electronic warfare capabilities. It has developed its own robotic systems. The Courier combat robot and the Liguchka kamikaze vehicle exist and are being used. But here's the structural problem no press release can fix. Ukraine has 280 companies producing 550-plus systems in a competitive, rapidly iterating ecosystem. Russia has a handful of state-adjacent programs operating under sanctions that limit access to critical components. You cannot out-iterate 280 companies with 3. The Russian army is, at this point, the only military in this conflict where the personnel department is busier than the procurement department. In conventional weapons development, a 3-year cycle is considered fast. In Ukraine's robotic sector, the cycle runs in weeks. Battlefield feedback goes directly to engineers. Engineers update the system. The updated system ships back to the front. Russia found this out the hard way with electronic warfare. They built expensive jamming infrastructure targeting radio-controlled systems. Ukraine responded with fiber optics. The entire investment became strategically redundant, not degraded, but redundant. That pattern, Russia spends, Ukraine adapts, Russia's spending becomes irrelevant, has now repeated multiple times across 2 years of this war. Russia is not getting faster at responding to it. Ukraine, under the pressure of necessity, is getting faster at generating it. Let's bring this back to what the 25,000 number means on the ground, because it's easy to say and hard to visualize. Ukraine has a manpower problem. The mobilization debates are real. Replacing soldiers killed in action is increasingly difficult. This is not a secret, and Minister Fedorov doesn't pretend otherwise. His stated goal, 100% of frontline logistics carried out by robotic systems. Every ammunition resupply, every casualty evacuation, every forward position run through the death zone unmanned. That's not futurism. Robots have been running resupply around Pokrovsk since December 2025. Fedorov himself noted that 6 months ago, robot casualty evacuation was rare. Today, it's routine. The transition from experiment to doctrine happened quietly at the front, while the procurement debates were still ongoing in Kiev. The cost side of this is just as stark. High-end ground robots run between $7,500 and $22,000. A tank takes years and millions. A lost robot gets replaced in weeks. One Ukrainian lieutenant put it plainly, "We lose about 3 robots a day. When we consider we're saving our infantrymen's lives, this is a small price." Commander Blecky of the 3rd Army Corps has projected 30% of infantry units replaced by robotic systems by the end of the year, 80% long-term. Take that with a grain of salt. Commanders are professionally optimistic about their own assets. But the direction is not in dispute, and the loss that matters most was never the robot. Finding a replacement for a lost soldier is Ukraine's biggest problem. Finding a replacement for a lost robot is a procurement email. Ukraine is no longer just receiving Western technology, it's selling its own. President Zelensky has signed 10-year defense agreements with Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar among those reported. And on April 14th, one day after the position capture, Ukraine showed the world exactly what they're buying. The headline system at the exhibition: the Sikin strike drone, 1,400-kilometer range, 40-kilogram warhead, operational in active electronic warfare environments. Russia's logistics infrastructure, command nodes, and manufacturing facilities are all inside that radius. The ground robot war and the long-range strike program aren't separate stories. They're the same strategy at different distances. This asymmetric logic has already proven itself at sea. Ukraine's naval drones, Mura and Sea Baby, have pushed Russia's Black Sea fleet back to port. Small, cheap, expendable. A fleet that cannot leave port has already lost the sea. One footnote worth watching. A San Francisco company called Foundation has delivered 2 Phantom Mk1 humanoid robots, 175 centimeters, 80 kilograms, capable of navigating stairs and doors, to Ukraine for field evaluation. Still experimental, but experimental in a war zone moves at a different pace than experimental in a demo room. Russia bet on one thing: Ukraine will run out of men first. Not an unreasonable bet. Historically, larger population, deeper reserves, willingness to absorb staggering casualties, that combination has ended wars before. Russia read the history and backed the playbook. The problem is, Ukraine changed the unit. Robots don't run out. Robots don't need mobilization legislation. Robots don't lie awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, calculating whether this is still worth it. And when a robot is lost, the response is a production order, not a funeral. Russia has counters for the army Ukraine had. It does not have counters for the army Ukraine is building. Not yet. And the gap is not closing. This is still just the opening act.